Everybody's got a story behind the eyeballs. I don't care. You look at the most famous people in the world, even some of the most famous pastors and preachers in the world, and they've all got problems. Whether they're going to get on camera and admit it or not, they've all got problems. I was an emotional basket case and didn't know what to do and didn't know how to verbalize it and express it. I'm Pastor Greg Locke. I'm the lead pastor of Global Vision Bible Church here in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. And Pastor Resources has asked me to share a little bit of my story. I denied it. I'd come to church, I'd smile, I'd preach. We were growing. God was doing some really extraordinary things in our local church ministry. And I would go home on Sunday night and I couldn't get out of bed for 2 or 3 days. I was mentally, physically, emotionally drained. I was exhausted. I was reading my Bible. I was praying. I was tithing. I was faithful to my wife. I was raising my kids. But I couldn't function. And I think what made me more angry is when my wife or the people that were closest and knew me the most intimately would say, "What is wrong with you?" And that would just set me in a blaze of anger because I couldn't explain what was wrong with me. I had no idea. And so several things began to happen. I began to see that I was just empty. I would preach, but it just felt so vain. And there was just no power, and the pizzazz of ministry was gone. And I couldn't figure out what it was, and it began to affect my kids. It began to affect my marriage. But I think some of the effects during that time was it did make me very angry, very frustrated with my kids. I would take out most of my ministerial and pastoral frustration, which we all have as shepherds, but I would take it all home to my wife and I would take it all home to my kids. The church would never see that. I'd get up and preach and smile like Jimmy Carter, happy-go-lucky, it was all good. And I would go home and I would just be so angry and upset because I couldn't verbalize, I couldn't express, what I was feeling. And so for a while, it really did put a strain on my wife's relationship to me. It put a strain on my relationship to my kids. And then for a while, I think it put a great strain on my relationship to the people. But here's where I knew that I needed to get some help. When I knew that I really needed to reach out and kind of go public and be vulnerable, because a lot of preachers are afraid if they're too vulnerable, their people aren't going to respect them. The opposite is true, I believe. I believe if we are vulnerable and we let people know that we are broken and we put our socks on one foot at a time like everybody else, that people can resonate with that. They can understand that kind of a shepherd. And so there was a new store that opened a few miles from the church here a couple of years ago. I drove to it. I got a cup of coffee. They were giving away free coffee that morning. And so I got some coffee and I came back to my minivan and I sat down. I put my cell phone over in the seat beside me. And I thought to myself, if I just lay my seat back for 10 minutes, I was just so mentally, physically exhausted. If I just lay my seat back and rest for a moment, just close my eyes, I can function, I can think. And I'll never forget, I laid my seat back. It was 8 o'clock that morning. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sheriff's department was banging on my window and asking if I was dead, if I was okay. And it startled me, and I woke up, and I had slept from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock in a MAPCO parking lot. And all of a sudden, when I woke up, I realized I didn't have my phone. I looked at it. I had 100 missed calls from my wife. People in the church were looking for me. And so that started the anxiety all over again and the stress, and I was so upset. But it was at that moment that I realized, wow, I do have a problem. I'm a pastor that struggles with some deep levels of depression and discouragement, and I need to get some help. Some people go the route of medicine. I didn't have to do that. But again, just spending more time with my wife, hiring a life coach, and getting outside and getting on a bicycle, using my physical abilities, it helped me tremendously. And it's not that it's completely gone, even over the course of these last 3 years, but it has lessened so much. And I have found that when I accept it and when I'm honest about it and when I get up and I say to our people and to people viewing this or to pastors' conferences that I preach in and teach in around the world, I'm able to get up and say, listen guys, it's okay to admit that you're not always okay. Because pastors are the guys that seem to have it all zipped up and all packaged together. And at the end of the day, we have struggles with our kids and we have struggles in our homes and with our marriages and in our finances and in our health. And everybody expects us to be perfect, but I don't believe God expects us to be perfect. And so when I was kind of at the climax of the time of depression in my life, I was reading one morning my Bible and I came across where David said in Psalm 62 and verse 1, when my heart is overwhelmed within me, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And I thought, that's it. That is the spiritual key. That is the principle of significance that I've been looking for. Here's David, a man after God's own heart. Yeah, he had some problems in his life, but here's this guy that pours out his soul and says, when my heart is overwhelmed within me. And in the ministry, that is what had happened. Our church was growing, my marriage was doing well, I had 4 kids, but I had all of this stuff. We were going through a building program and all of that. And when I read that, it immediately resonated with my spirit. When my heart is overwhelmed within me. And we all get there. And sometimes if we're not careful, we stay there. I don't think the problem is to get discouraged. I think the problem is to stay discouraged. But I read about Moses. I read about Elijah. I read about Jonah. I read about David. I read about the Apostle Paul. Even John the Baptist had his doubts in prison. And so I read about all of these men of God in the Bible that lived exactly what I was walking out. They had been on that journey before. And that was a theological light bulb moment when I read, when my heart is overwhelmed within me, because I was overwhelmed. And then he said, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And when I understood that greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world, the God within me is so much bigger than the pressures that I feel within or without. And when I understood that He is my rock, He is my firm, fundamental foundation, it really changed my perspective. So when I embraced it, when I embraced the depression and the discouragement and what I was going through, it was almost as if that's what God was waiting on me to do. I heard that still small voice, and when I embraced it, God said, now I'm going to use this. I call it the route out. God always has a route out. But again, we have to go through the process. It's real. And when I began to go through it, the first line of defense was to throw up my hands and say, no, I am not going through depression. You know, it's a little bit of discouragement. Maybe the church needs to grow faster. The offerings aren't big enough. And God said, no, knucklehead, I'm taking you through something so that your pain can be used as a platform for others. And so I found that when I share the story, people resonate almost immediately with it, and they're able to say, hey, wow, I've got what this guy is admitting right now.